you?
Good morning, Tom. Good.
There are, as you and I talked on Monday, and we said I wanted to talk about issues specifically, and the more and more I thought about this, the fact is, when I turn on the national news and the lead story is about the NFL, I don't care. I do care, but it's not the lead story, and it's not the most important story. The most important story, I think, does not get reported. It's a number. This morning, the U.S. debt for our country is $17,746,586,000,000, and I think the 586 million is now 613 million. I mean, that's how quick it's ticking up. This is our country and our country's workers bleeding all over the place.
Exactly. And there are so many issues out there that can be worked on, Tom, to try to reduce that debt. Even in the point that, last week we had the Chairman Lucas came in to support me, Chairman of the Ag Committee, who actually was the author of the Farm Bill, and as hard as it was to get passed. And the original Farm Bill itself would have made sensible reductions in the food stamp program, not to cut away from those people who are most in need, but sensible reductions, and they showed where it was, and the original bill showed that they could have saved as much as $40 billion. Then they came to a negotiated bill that went to $20 billion. Were not able to get that passed because the Senate wouldn't allow it to pass, and then they came back and were able to finally pass the bill, and it had $8 billion savings. Is that good? Sure. But should it have been more, and could it have been done and still been able to provide the needs for those who are needing the food? Yes. But we have to be sensible, not only in that spending, but also in every other thing that's out there to try to bring down that debt. That debt is just waning and weighing on our grandchildren. And I told people whenever I started running for this, Tom, it is those type things. What are we turning over? First off, we're going to turn over a debt that they can't possibly pay off in their lifetime. But not only that, we're providing them a country that is so overregulated on jobs in the state, or in the United States, whether it's in agriculture or whether it is in the coal mine industry or the oil industry. We keep dragging our feet in the expansion of these areas where we could actually benefit and become, generate jobs to a level that we can truly compete in a world market. But instead, we put regulations on our citizens that they don't have in other countries, and then we're wondering why we can't compete.
All right, now let's take a look at Mike's comment here and talk about this our kids that have to pay it off. The debt per citizen is $55,651. That's per citizen, okay? But it's not per taxpayer. Per taxpayer, it's $152,159. That's per taxpayer. This illustrates another item. Right now in this country, we saw a 0.5% decrease in poverty from 15 to 14.5. That still means 45.3 million Americans are on the poverty line, and still in Washington, they can't come up with a spending plan.
But that is exactly what I was just talking about, Tom. When you have a situation where we have so many overburdensome government relations or government regulations that actually take away from the opportunity for job growth, whether it's the coal fields, the oil fields, whether it's our agricultural issues and how we keep strangling the family farm, that the family farm just to survive has to keep growing bigger, and then we put things like Obamacare in place where it actually strangles the small business that discourages people from being in business. We're encouraging people not to have jobs. We're encouraging people not to provide employment. We're encouraged, and it's all done by government bureaucracy to a point that we other countries don't face this. Other countries don't face this, and we have to become wiser. Now, does that mean we don't strive for all these betterments that several things are being argued for, everything from clean water, everything like that, and to make sure that we're good stewards? Sure we are. Sure we should. We should pursue the best technology for other fuels besides coal and oil, but we should definitely use our resources while they're now available, because if we don't, somebody else is.
All right, is the problem in Washington not dysfunction? Is the problem ideology, that one ideology has won, and that has caused this kind of debt. When you look at congressional reports now, and I'm not talking about some type of rhetoric or some blog, the congressional report says almost all the economic recovery has gone to immigrants to this country, and they're getting the jobs, they're getting the pay increases, and we're seeing more and more of this. And this is from the congressional report.
I think it is from a philosophy standpoint. I think, we are away from which was referred to as the greatest generation, who suffered through a depression and understand what it's like to have to fight for every dime, and then fought in 2 world wars. If you look at this and just the mindset but that doesn't mean our American dream is gone. It means that we have to focus and allow the opportunity for the United States, to be given the opportunity to work, to have jobs. And I'm telling you that whenever we had the proposal that came in with the EPA, and I'm telling you that Congress actually voted to stop the rules that were moving forward with the EPA, not with my opponent's vote, but we did as the Congress did. They sent it over to the Senate. Senate refused to act on it. Thank heaven the courts then stopped this implementation. Now, folks, you got to understand that the large-scale implementation if this would have been implemented, what it would have done. It would have 46% of Illinois electricity is produced by coal. This would have shut that down. Can you imagine blowing a 46% hole in our operations of our electrical system, the rolling brownouts, the blackouts, and the cost that would have been handed off to you talk about the little widow that is trying to make it. All of a sudden she gets inflation like that on her electric bill. We'll just devastate them. And that's where we're losing. Congress must stop the bureaucracy. They must. And they must be very aware. That doesn't mean we still don't want safe, efficient operation of businesses. It means that we want to put ourselves in a position where we compete with the world and provide ourselves with the things that are necessary and grow the economy and provide and encourage people to create jobs.
National security is another one of the driving issues right now. And here's the thing. The U.S. national debt has a direct relationship to this nation's national security in relationship to China in particular right now, because a lot of this debt, for the first time in U.S. history, $6 trillion of this $17,746 billion debt is owned by other countries, entities, banks, correct, and on the list goes. And China's finally aware of this, and if when these statements about, hey, you need to stop your surveillance flights, when we see their jets harrying ours, the issue of Taiwan, on the list goes. This is a big deal when it comes to national security. It's not just ISIS that's a threat. There are big picture items. The reemergence of almost a Cold War mentality with Russia. China is much more economically stable. They've got, I think they bought their first aircraft carrier from France. I mean, on the list goes. There are other issues in this world when it comes to security, and not the least of which is the new threat that has been denied coming across the border when we find Korans, prayer mats, and direct statements of threats in relationship to the Islamic threat on the fences on the southern border. We are under attack.
Right. We're under attack from several fronts. One, our financial attack, as you said, from China, and that now. And let me tell you that former ambassador to the UN, I was about 6 months ago, listened to him speak. He basically said that, think about this, China is building a navy, and it is an unbelievable navy and an unbelievable fighting force. And they have the money and the technology to do it. And we see them, but the problem is they own a lot of our debt. There's a danger, as you just explained there. Now, remember, this is the first time, last time China had a navy, it was with wooden ships. So, folks, it's a real threat out there. But then we've got another front. This terrorist groups, they haven't gone away. How well we've seen that. And right now, with Congress dealing with ISIL, And understand that Congressman Shimkus and I talked a day and a half ago about a thing that he is being presented to show exactly the state that ISIL is proposing to build. Now, understand that it is not a state. It is a state that, if they get their way, would consume Jordan, consume Israel, take a large chunk of Egypt, and the green map. I mean, he sent this to me on a world map. Show me exactly what the proposal is, what the first step is, and what the second step is on how large this is, what their proposal is. They've got money, and they are dangerous, and it's not just dangerous to the Middle East, but it's dangerous to us in the long run, because they work just like any other terrorist organization, and they're powerful. And we need to be aware. We should have. Hindsight's always 20. There's no need to worry about water that's already passed underneath the bridge. But the reality is that we should have had a presence. We should have kept a presence, a sensible presence, and we wouldn't be here today.
When it comes to America, it's jobs, it's the economy, because a whole host of problems are shed away in the process. But You've got dysfunction in Washington, and you and I both question the governmental ability to create jobs. When you have Nancy Pelosi saying that food stamps are good for the economy, I mean, you have a clear disconnect in Washington, D.C.
Let me tell you this. Food stamps are not good for the economy. Food stamps, jobs are good for the economy. And let me explain that again. I have said over and over again, if a politician tells you they're going to create jobs, they're not telling the truth. What government does is get out of the way. Allow the entrepreneurship and the ability of the American people to do what we do. And what we do is we understand we see a golden opportunity, and we run with it. And we create jobs by private business. We create jobs by making sure that if I'm encouraged to do a certain job, I don't have to worry about going through all the government red tape every time I turn around, or all of a sudden worrying about if the rainwater that runs off if you're a farmer, if the rainwater running off my brim of my hat is all of a sudden under control of the EPA. I mean, and that's not. I know people think that's an exaggeration, but this step that the EPA is also trying to do, and the farmers understand this. Believe me, the farmers understand it. That of controlling what is the waters that are under control of the federal government. Always before it is what's known as navigable waterways. They're trying to change that, and when they change that, the danger is, and the best way I can explain it is, that if you're on your front porch and you've poured water into your dog bowl and it runs over, it might be that the federal government says that's a hazardous spill. So, this is how ridiculous this can get, because government is growing too big.
While we, at the same time, importing millions of metric tons of mercury in the form of light bulbs from China that are required by the federal government. And every time you break one, you need a hazmat team. I mean, we literally have gotten to the point where, there are clear indications to me about the wrongness of Washington, D.C. And yesterday, when Senator Maria Cantwell decided she wanted to introduce legislation to end the NFL's tax status for refusing to drop the name Redskins.
No, come on.
All right, now let's take a look at what this means. And whether Redskins politically correct, that's not the issue here.
That's not the argument. The argument is, why in the world is the federal government worried about this when it's like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic? Folks, deal with the issues at hand that create jobs, that allow jobs creation. Deal with the issues at hand in protecting our borders. Deal with the issues of hand at making sure our national security is in place and that foreign trade is occurring. That's it. That's it.
Mike, there's a TV ad running now that questions your stability, that questions your role in building debt and voting for tax increases in the state of Illinois. Basically, it's all your fault. Illinois is a situation you find it in. Did you find after watching that TV commercial, you're a great deal more powerful than you'd earlier known?
Well, what amazes me is that when they show me throwing what they paint as the rant or whatever, I guess I only have two ties, because I look at that and realize I'm in the same clothes all the time, so they're just showing the same thing over and over again. And if 20 years standing up for my constituents in the way that I did was wrong, then hold me accountable. That's fine. But the reality is that I fought against tax increases. that I fought to make sure that we, the people of Southern Illinois, were being heard, that I argued for less regulation, more jobs, that I stood up for our rights, our Second Amendment rights, and being the author of concealed carry over and over again to argue and finally getting that passed, to work to create a sensible government place as far as fracking was concerned so that we could actually create those jobs if the administration would allow it to move forward. To stand up, I'll give you a good example. Really, the problems that have occurred in Springfield over the last 12, 14 years, because you got to remember where the budget is, and look at what the actual budget was 14 years ago, occurred with a guy by the name of Rod Blagojevich. And who was the guy that spoke up and said, we need to impeach him first? It was me. It was actually a year and a half before we got it done. And he had already violated 11 of the 7 things we impeached him for, of the 13 things we impeached him for. So, am I part of the problem? No, sir. I think I was part of the solution in the many places we were able to.
Do you think that it's surprising that people look into a TV camera and saying this state's budget is balanced when the debt at this minute is $160,916,899? Oops. Well, $900,380.
Well, let's look at that, because the thing is, here's the real issue. When the media asked Mike Madigan a couple years ago, Speaker Madigan, we actually have a balanced budget amendment in the state of Illinois. When is the budget balanced? He said, when I said it is. When I said it is. But yet we're sending people to Springfield that'll vote for him for Speaker. Wake up. So that's on the state level. But now, remember, Tom, now I'm asking, are you happy with what's going on in Washington? Are you willing to go ahead and send somebody who just sits there like everybody else and come along and follow along? Or do you want somebody that will stand up for us, that will argue the point, that will you know what? Even to the point that if somebody says, hey, I don't agree with you, but at least argue it. At least, that's the way it was said. You think they didn't argue between the forefathers that were first put in place? I mean, if you study history, the people that
well, let me back Mike up on this. By the way, we declared independence 1776. It was on this date in 1787 the actual Constitution finally got completed and signed. It's an age-old tradition. Congressional candidate, State Representative Mike Bost. Mike, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me on, Tom. I appreciate it.
The Road Construction Report is brought to you by E.T. Simons Construction and the